She was only the military SUV driver until she took out 32 enemy combatants, single-handedly. The desert heat shimmered off the black asphalt as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her rearview mirror for the third time that morning. At 26 years old, she had been driving military vehicles for the past 4 years, but today felt different. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like the oppressive Iraqi sun beating through the windshield of her armored SUV. Maria had never intended to become a military driver. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she had dreams of becoming a mechanic, working on cars in her father's garage after school. But when her younger brother enlisted and was killed in action during his first deployment, everything changed. She felt a calling to serve, to honor his memory, and to protect others the way she couldn't protect him. The convoy she was assigned to today consisted of 5 vehicles carrying a team of intelligence officers to a remote outpost near the Syrian border. It was supposed to be a routine transport mission, the kind she had completed dozens of times before. The officers were investigating reports of increased enemy activity in the region, gathering information that could save countless lives. As she checked her equipment one final time, Maria's commanding officer, Captain Thompson, approached her vehicle. He was a seasoned veteran with graying temples and kind eyes that had seen too much war. "Santos, you ready for this run?" he asked, leaning against her door. "Yes, sir. Route is clear, weather conditions are good, and all vehicles are running perfectly," she replied, her voice steady despite the nervous energy building in her chest. Captain Thompson nodded approvingly. "I know this seems like just another milk run, but intelligence suggests there might be increased insurgent activity in the area. Keep your eyes open and trust your instincts. You're one of our best drivers for a reason." Maria felt a surge of pride at his words. She had earned her reputation through countless hours of training and flawless execution of her duties. Her fellow soldiers often joked that she could navigate a tank through a needle's eye, but they said it with respect and admiration. The convoy began moving at exactly 0800 hours. Maria maintained her position as the second vehicle, keeping precise distance from the lead SUV while monitoring her mirrors for the 3 vehicles following behind. The landscape around them was harsh and unforgiving, a mixture of rocky terrain and sparse vegetation that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. During her first year of service, Maria had struggled with the isolation of her role. While other soldiers worked in teams, building close bonds through shared experiences, drivers often worked alone, responsible for the safety of their passengers but somewhat removed from their camaraderie. It took time for her to understand that her role was just as crucial as any other, perhaps more so because lives depended on her skill and judgment. The first hour of the journey passed without incident. The radio crackled occasionally with routine check-ins and status updates. Maria found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of long-distance military transport, constantly scanning the road ahead while remaining alert to any signs of danger. As they approached a narrow valley between 2 hills, something caught Maria's attention. A flash of sunlight reflecting off metal in the rocks above made her instantly alert. Her training kicked in, and she began analyzing everything around her with heightened awareness. The road through the valley was the only viable route to their destination, but it also presented the perfect opportunity for an ambush. The steep sides provided excellent cover for attackers while limiting the convoy's ability to maneuver. Maria's pulse quickened as she realized they were entering what military tacticians called a kill zone. She keyed her radio to report her concerns to the convoy leader, but before she could speak, the world exploded around her. The first rocket-propelled grenade struck the lead vehicle, sending it careening off the road in a ball of smoke and flame. Almost immediately, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions in the hills on both sides of the valley. The distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds filled the air as bullets began striking her armored windshield. Maria's training took over completely. Without conscious thought, she swerved hard to avoid the burning wreckage of the lead vehicle while simultaneously reaching for her radio to call for backup. But as she looked in her rearview mirror, her heart sank. The third vehicle in the convoy was also burning, and she could see muzzle flashes from at least a dozen different positions in the rocks above. The enemy had planned this ambush perfectly. They had waited for the convoy to enter the valley before attacking from elevated positions on both sides, creating a crossfire that would be devastating to anyone caught in the open. The convoy was trapped with nowhere to run. "This is Santos in Vehicle 2, she radioed, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Lead vehicle is down, Vehicle 3 is down. Requesting immediate backup." The response crackled through her headset. "Santos, nearest support is 40 minutes out. You need to hold your position and protect the intelligence team." 40 minutes. Maria's mind raced as she processed this information. In 40 minutes, they would all be dead unless she did something drastic. The intelligence officers in her vehicle were already returning fire through the gun ports, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. As another RPG streaked past her windshield, Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Instead of taking a defensive position and waiting for backup, she was going to take the fight directly to the enemy. "Hold on back there," she called to her passengers as she spun the wheel hard to the right, driving directly toward the hillside where the heaviest concentration of enemy fire was coming from. The intelligence officers in her vehicle looked at her in shock. "Santos, what are you doing?" one of them shouted over the sound of gunfire. "Saving our lives," she replied, her jaw set with determination. Maria had studied every inch of terrain in this region during her mission briefings. She knew there was a narrow path that led up the eastern hillside, originally carved by goat herders but wide enough for a vehicle if driven skillfully. If she could reach the high ground, she could turn the tactical advantage around. The SUV bounced violently as she left the paved road and began climbing the rocky slope. Bullets pinged off the armored sides of her vehicle as enemy fighters realized what she was attempting. They concentrated their fire on her SUV, trying to stop her before she could reach their position. Maria's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity as she navigated between boulders and around sharp turns on the narrow path. Her vehicle was never designed for this kind of terrain, but her years of experience and natural driving ability allowed her to push it beyond its normal capabilities. As she climbed higher, Maria began to see individual enemy positions. The insurgents had set up a sophisticated ambush with interlocking fields of fire, but they had made one critical mistake. They had positioned themselves to attack vehicles on the road below, not to defend against someone coming up behind them. When she reached a small plateau about halfway up the hill, Maria stopped the vehicle and turned to her passengers. "I need you to cover me," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The senior intelligence officer, Major Williams, stared at her in amazement. "Santos, you're just a driver. You're not trained for assault operations." Maria checked her service pistol and grabbed an M4 rifle from the vehicle's weapons rack. "Sir, with all due respect, those insurgents down there are about to find out exactly what this driver can do." What happened next would become the stuff of military legend. Maria Santos, a small-town girl from Texas who had only wanted to serve her country and honor her brother's memory, was about to single-handedly turn the tide of battle against overwhelming odds. As she prepared to leave the safety of her armored vehicle and take the fight directly to the enemy, Maria thought about her brother and all the soldiers who had given their lives in service to their country. She thought about the intelligence officers depending on her for their survival and the backup convoy that was still 35 minutes away. But mostly, she thought about doing her job the same way she had approached every challenge in her military career, with skill, determination, and an unwavering commitment to bringing everyone home safely. The battle for the valley was just beginning, and Maria Santos was about to prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. Her transformation from military driver to combat legend was about to unfold on a sun-scorched hillside in Iraq, where courage and skill would be tested against impossible odds. The radio crackled one more time as the convoy commander's voice cut through the static. "All units, hold your positions. Help is coming." Maria keyed her microphone one final time before leaving her vehicle. "Sir, help has arrived. This is Santos, and I'm going to work." She was only the military SUV driver. Until she took out 32 enemy combatants. Single-handedly, Maria stepped out of her SUV into the scorching desert air, her boots finding purchase on the rocky ground. The sounds of battle echoed through the valley below as the remaining convoy vehicles continued to take heavy fire. She could hear the sharp crack of incoming rounds and the deeper boom of RPG explosions, but up here on the plateau, she had a tactical advantage the enemy had never expected. The first insurgent position was only 50 meters away, hidden behind a pile of large boulders. Maria could see the muzzle flashes from their automatic weapons as they fired down into the valley. They had no idea she was behind them, closing in with the silence of a predator stalking prey. Her military training had taught her to move quietly and efficiently, but Maria had learned stealth much earlier in life. Growing up in rural Texas, she had spent countless hours hunting with her father and brother, learning to read terrain and move without disturbing the natural rhythm of the environment. Those skills served her well now as she approached her first target. The insurgent was focused entirely on the convoy below, firing controlled bursts from his AK-47, while his partner loaded another RPG. They were speaking in hushed Arabic, coordinating their attack with deadly precision. Maria counted 3 fighters at this position, all of them completely unaware of her presence. She raised her M4 rifle, steadying her breathing the way her father had taught her during deer hunting season. The first shot was clean and precise, dropping the RPG gunner before he could fire another round. The second insurgent spun around in surprise, but Maria's second shot found its mark before he could raise his weapon. The third fighter dove for cover behind the rocks, shouting warnings to his comrades in nearby positions. Maria's element of surprise was gone, but she had eliminated the most dangerous weapon at this position. She moved quickly to a new vantage point as return fire began chipping away at the rocks where she had been standing. 2 down, she whispered to herself, beginning the mental count that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The insurgents were now aware of her presence, but they were facing a tactical nightmare. Their positions had been designed to create interlocking fields of fire against targets in the valley below, not to defend against an attack from above and behind. They had to split their attention between the convoy vehicles and this unexpected threat on their flank. Maria used this confusion to her advantage, moving from position to position with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood both the terrain and her enemy's limitations. Her years of studying military tactics during off-duty hours were paying dividends as she exploited every weakness in their defensive setup. The next position was more challenging. 4 insurgents had taken cover in a natural depression in the rocks, and they were now aware of her presence. As she approached, they opened fire, forcing her to seek cover behind a large boulder. The distinctive whistle of bullets passing close to her head was a sound she would never forget. Maria assessed her situation quickly. The depression where the insurgents were hiding was positioned so she couldn't get a clear shot from her current location. But she noticed a narrow ledge that ran along the hillside about 20 feet above their position. If she could reach it without being seen, she would have a perfect angle for attack. The climb to the ledge required her to move through open ground where the insurgents could see her. It was a calculated risk, but Maria had made her decision. She sprinted from her cover, drawing fire from all 4 fighters as she scrambled up the rocky slope toward the ledge. Bullets struck the rocks around her, sending chips of stone flying through the air. One round came so close it tore through the sleeve of her uniform, but Maria kept climbing. Her physical conditioning, honed through years of military training, allowed her to maintain speed and agility even under fire. She reached the ledge and immediately took aim at the insurgents below. From this angle, their cover was useless, and they were exposed in their depression. Maria's rifle fire was methodical and accurate. 4 more insurgents fell silent, their weapons clattering against the rocks. 6 down, she counted, her breathing steady despite the physical exertion and adrenaline. In the valley below, she could hear Major Williams calling her on the radio. "Santos, what's your status? We're seeing reduced fire from the eastern positions." Maria keyed her microphone while scanning for the next threat. "I'm mobile and engaging enemy positions. Keep the convoy buttoned up and wait for my signal." The next cluster of insurgents was further up the hillside, positioned near what appeared to be a command post. Maria could see them gesturing frantically as they tried to coordinate a response to her unexpected assault. She counted at least 6 fighters at this position, including one who appeared to be directing operations through a handheld radio. This position would be her most challenging target yet. The insurgents were now fully alert to her presence, and they had reorganized their defense to account for her attack angle. As she approached, they opened fire with everything they had, forcing her to take cover behind increasingly smaller rocks and outcroppings. Maria realized she needed to change her tactics. The direct approach that had worked for the first two positions wouldn't be sufficient here. She studied the terrain around the command post, looking for any advantage she could exploit. She noticed a small ravine that ran parallel to the insurgent position, hidden from their view by a ridge of rocks. If she could work her way through the ravine, she could approach from their blind side while they remained focused on her last known position. The movement through the ravine was slow and careful. The rocky ground was uneven and treacherous, and she had to crawl much of the way to avoid being seen. The sounds of battle continued around her, with the insurgents maintaining sporadic fire toward her previous location, while the convoy vehicles returned fire from the valley below. When she emerged from the ravine, Maria was less than 30 meters from the command post, positioned where the insurgents' own defensive positions blocked their view of her approach. She could hear them talking urgently in Arabic, trying to coordinate their remaining forces for a final assault on the convoy. Maria's attack on the command post was swift and decisive. She eliminated the radio operator first, cutting off their communications with other insurgent groups in the area. The remaining fighters at the position fell quickly to her accurate rifle fire, their resistance crumbling as their command structure disintegrated. 12 down, she whispered, her mental count continuing as she moved toward the final cluster of enemy positions. The western side of the valley presented a different challenge. The remaining insurgents had seen what happened to their comrades on the eastern slope, and they were now trying to withdraw from their positions. Maria could see them moving along the ridgeline, attempting to escape before she could reach them. But Maria Santos had not come this far to let the enemy escape and potentially regroup for another attack. She began pursuing them along the hillside, using her superior knowledge of the terrain and her physical conditioning to close the distance. The chase across the rocky terrain was intense and dangerous. The fleeing insurgents periodically turned to fire at her, forcing Maria to seek cover while maintaining pursuit. But fear was driving them now, and their marksmanship suffered as they focused more on escape than accurate shooting. Maria caught up with the first group of 3 insurgents as they tried to cross a narrow saddle between 2 hills. They had paused to catch their breath, thinking they had gained enough distance to be safe. They were wrong. Her approach was silent and deadly. The insurgents fell before they realized she had found them, their weapons never coming to bear on their pursuer. Maria's training and natural hunting instincts made her a formidable opponent in this environment. 15 down, she counted, continuing her relentless pursuit of the remaining enemy forces. The final group of insurgents had taken defensive positions on a small hilltop, apparently deciding to make a last stand rather than continue running. Maria could see at least 8 fighters arranged in a rough perimeter, their weapons trained on all possible approaches to their position. This would be her most difficult challenge yet. The insurgents were in a strong defensive position with good fields of fire in all directions. They were no longer running, which meant they would be more accurate with their shooting. And they were desperate, which made them extremely dangerous. Maria studied their position carefully, looking for any weakness she could exploit. The hilltop was rocky and exposed, offering little cover for an attacking force. But she noticed that the insurgents had positioned themselves to defend against attacks from the valley floor, not from someone approaching at their own elevation from an adjacent hill. She worked her way around to the northern side of their position, moving carefully from rock to rock while staying below the ridgeline. The approach took nearly 20 minutes, during which time she could hear the insurgents growing more agitated as they realized the sounds of battle from other positions had fallen silent. When Maria finally reached an attack position, she was less than 40 meters from the insurgent perimeter. She could see individual fighters clearly, noting their positions and fields of fire. Most importantly, she could see that their attention remained focused primarily on the valley below and the approaches from the south and east. Her assault on the final position was the culmination of everything she had learned during her time in the military and her life before service. She moved with the stealth of a hunter, the precision of a marksman, and the tactical awareness of a trained soldier. The first insurgent fell without his comrades realizing what had happened. Maria had positioned herself so that his body fell behind cover, hidden from the view of the other fighters. She waited patiently for the right moment to engage the next target. One by one, the remaining insurgents fell to her accurate fire. Some never knew what hit them. Others had time to turn and fire wild shots before Maria's rifle found its mark. But the outcome was never in doubt. Maria Santos had transformed from a military driver into an instrument of precise, deadly force. When the last insurgent fell silent, Maria keyed her radio to report to the convoy below. "This is Santos. All enemy positions neutralized. Valley is secure." The response came immediately from Major Williams. "Santos, are you saying you've cleared all the insurgent positions by yourself?" Maria looked around at the silent hilltops that had been alive with enemy fire just minutes before. Her mental count had reached 23, but she knew there were more enemy dead at positions she hadn't been able to verify. "Affirmative, sir. You're clear to move." As she began making her way back down the hillside toward her SUV, Maria Santos couldn't have imagined that her actions would become the stuff of military legend. She had simply done what needed to be done, using every skill she possessed to protect her fellow soldiers and complete her mission. But the war wasn't over yet, and Maria's remarkable day was far from finished. She was only the military SUV driver until she took out 32 enemy combatants. Single-handedly, Maria descended the rocky hillside with methodical precision, her rifle ready and her senses alert for any remaining threats. The silence that had fallen over the valley was profound after the intense gunfire of the past hour, broken only by the distant hum of the convoy vehicles and the occasional radio transmission from the intelligence team below. As she approached her SUV, Major Williams emerged from the armored vehicle with the expression of complete bewilderment on his face. Behind him, the other intelligence officers were staring at the now quiet hillsides, where dozens of insurgent positions had been active just moments before. "Santos," Major Williams said, his voice filled with disbelief. "What exactly just happened up there?" Maria checked her weapon and began loading fresh magazines into her gear. "Sir, I eliminated the immediate threat to our convoy. The route should be clear for extraction, but I recommend we move quickly in case there are additional insurgent forces in the area." The major shook his head slowly. "Santos, we counted at least 30 insurgent fighters in those positions. Our satellite intelligence suggested this was a full company-sized ambush. Are you telling me you eliminated all of them?" Before Maria could respond, her radio crackled with an urgent transmission from the convoy's surviving vehicles. "Santos, we've got movement on the northern ridge. Looks like reinforcements arriving from the main insurgent base." Maria immediately raised her binoculars and scanned the northern horizon. Sure enough, she could see a column of vehicles approaching at high speed, their dust clouds visible from miles away. Her heart sank as she realized their situation was about to become even more desperate. "Sir, we need to move immediately," she told Major Williams. "Those reinforcements will be here in less than 10 minutes, and we don't have the defensive position to hold against a larger force." But as Maria continued watching the approaching vehicles, she realized something that changed everything. The convoy route they had planned to take would lead them directly into the path of the incoming insurgent reinforcements. They were about to jump from the frying pan into the fire. "Cancel that, sir," Maria said, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. "If we take the planned route, we'll run right into those reinforcements, but I have an alternative." Major Williams looked at her with growing respect and concern. "What are you thinking, Santos?" Maria pointed to a narrow track that wound through the hills to the east, barely visible from their current position. "There's an old smuggler's route through those mountains. It's rough terrain, but it will get us to the extraction point while avoiding the insurgent reinforcements entirely." The major studied the terrain she was indicating. "Santos, that's not even a road. It's just goat tracks and dried stream beds. Our vehicles will never make it through there." Maria's expression was calm but determined. "Sir, with respect, I can get us through. But we need to move right now, before those reinforcements reach the valley." As if to emphasize her point, the sound of heavy machine gun fire erupted from the northern approach. The insurgent reinforcements had encountered the burning wrecks of the convoy's lead and third vehicles and were now sweeping the area for survivors. Major Williams made his decision. "All right, Santos, you've kept us alive this long. Lead the way." Maria quickly coordinated with the surviving convoy vehicles, explaining the alternate route and the challenges they would face. The remaining drivers expressed serious doubts about attempting such difficult terrain, but none of them questioned her judgment after what they had just witnessed. The escape through the mountain tracks was unlike anything Maria had ever attempted before. The path was treacherous, with steep drop-offs on one side and unstable rocky slopes on the other. Several times the convoy had to stop, while Maria personally guided each vehicle through particularly difficult sections. Her intimate knowledge of vehicle dynamics and terrain navigation proved crucial. She had studied every type of military vehicle in service, understanding their capabilities and limitations in various conditions. More importantly, she had an intuitive feel for how machines behaved under stress, a skill developed through years of working in her father's garage. 2 hours into their escape, disaster struck. The third vehicle in the convoy, already damaged from the initial ambush, broke down completely when its transmission failed on a steep incline. The vehicle was blocking the narrow track, and there was no room for the other SUVs to pass around it. Maria assessed the situation quickly. The disabled vehicle contained 3 wounded soldiers from the original ambush, men who would die if left behind. But the vehicle itself was beyond repair, and the insurgent reinforcements were undoubtedly searching for them throughout the region. "We transfer the wounded to the other vehicles and continue on foot if necessary," she decided. But nobody gets left behind. The evacuation of the wounded soldiers was complicated by their injuries and the difficult terrain, but Maria's leadership kept everyone focused on the task. She personally carried one unconscious soldier nearly half a mile to where the track widened enough for the convoy to reorganize. As they prepared to continue their escape, Maria's radio picked up insurgent communications. Her basic Arabic, learned during military language training, was sufficient to understand that multiple search teams were now combing the hills looking for the convoy. Time was running out. The final leg of their journey required Maria to guide the remaining vehicles through a section of terrain that would have been challenging for mountain climbers, much less military SUVs. A narrow ledge carved into the side of a cliff face was the only route to their extraction point, with a sheer drop of several hundred feet on one side. Maria took the lead vehicle, demonstrating the precise line each driver needed to follow. Her hands were steady on the wheel as she navigated the treacherous path, but she could feel the weight of responsibility for every life in the convoy. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and everyone would die. The ledge was so narrow that the vehicle's side mirrors scraped against the rock wall. Maria had to stop several times to clear loose rocks from the path or to guide the following drivers through particularly difficult sections. The whole convoy moved at walking pace, with Maria frequently getting out to personally direct each vehicle's movement. When they finally reached the extraction point, a flat area where helicopters could land safely, Maria allowed herself a moment of relief. But that relief was short-lived when her radio crackled with an urgent message from their Tactical Operations Center. "Convoy leader, be advised that extraction helicopters are delayed due to heavy insurgent activity in the area. Estimated arrival is now 60 minutes. Maria felt her heart sink. 60 minutes was too long to remain in one position with insurgent forces actively hunting for them. The extraction point, while suitable for helicopter operations, offered very little defensive cover. If the insurgents found them here, the convoy would be sitting ducks. She studied the terrain around the extraction point, looking for defensive positions that could protect the convoy during the extended wait. There was a small hill overlooking the landing zone that would provide excellent fields of fire, but reaching it would require leaving the vehicles behind. "Major Williams," she called to the intelligence officer, "I need to establish an overwatch position on that hill. If insurgent forces find us here, someone needs to be in position to provide covering fire for the extraction." The major looked at the hill she was indicating, then back at Maria with growing concern. "Santos, you've already done more than enough. Let someone else take the overwatch position." Maria shook her head firmly. "Sir, with respect, I'm the best shooter we have, and I know this terrain better than anyone else now. If those insurgents find us, I'm the best chance we have of holding them off until the helicopters arrive." Despite Major Williams' protests, Maria gathered extra ammunition and began climbing toward the hilltop position. She had barely reached the crest when her worst fears were realized. Dust clouds on the horizon indicated that insurgent search teams had found their trail and were approaching the extraction point. From her elevated position, Maria could see that the insurgents had divided into three groups, approaching the extraction point from different directions in a coordinated assault. She counted at least 40 fighters, more than enough to overwhelm the convoy if they reached the landing zone. Maria keyed her radio to warn the convoy below. I count 3 insurgent teams approaching your position. Take cover behind the vehicles and prepare for contact. I'll engage from Overwatch. What followed was the most intense firefight of Maria's life. The insurgents advanced with military precision, using covering fire and tactical movement to close the distance to the extraction point. But Maria's elevated position allowed her to engage each group as they moved across the open ground. Her marksmanship was devastating. Years of hunting experience combined with military training made her a deadly accurate shot at extended ranges. The insurgents found themselves caught in the open as Maria's rifle fire picked off their fighters one by one. The first insurgent team took heavy casualties as they attempted to cross a flat area with no cover. Maria's precise shooting forced them to retreat, leaving several bodies scattered across the rocky ground. Her mental count, which had paused during the convoy's escape, resumed climbing. The second team tried to approach using a dried stream bed for cover, but Maria adjusted her position to maintain observation of their route. When they emerged from the stream bed to assault the convoy vehicles, they walked directly into her field of fire. None of them reached their objective. The third team had learned from the fate of their comrades and attempted a more cautious approach, moving from cover to cover and presenting only brief targets. But Maria's patience and skill proved superior to their tactical awareness. She waited for clear shots and made each round count. By the time she heard the distinctive sound of approaching helicopters, Maria had eliminated 9 more insurgent fighters and forced the remaining enemies to retreat to positions too distant to threaten the extraction. Her total count had reached 32 enemy combatants eliminated in a single day. The helicopter extraction proceeded without incident, with Maria maintaining her overwatch position until every member of the convoy was safely aboard the aircraft. Only then did she abandon her hilltop position and sprint across the landing zone to catch the last helicopter as it prepared to depart. As the helicopter climbed away from the extraction point, Major Williams sat beside Maria, shaking his head in amazement. "Santos, in 20 years of military service, I have never seen anything like what you did today. You saved all our lives multiple times." Maria stared out the helicopter window at the rugged terrain below, thinking about the events of the day. "Sir, I was just doing my job. Getting everyone home safely is what drivers do." Major Williams laughed despite the exhaustion and stress they had all endured. "Santos, what you did today went far beyond driving. You single-handedly defeated a company-sized insurgent force and led a tactical withdrawal through impossible terrain. That's not driving, that's military genius." When they arrived at their forward operating base, news of Maria's actions had already preceded them. Intelligence reports confirmed that she had eliminated 32 insurgent fighters and disrupted a major enemy operation in the region. The implications went far beyond their single convoy mission. The insurgent force that had ambushed them was part of a larger network that had been responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces in the area. Maria's actions had not only saved the lives of the intelligence team, but had dealt a significant blow to enemy operations throughout the region. In the weeks that followed, Maria Santos found herself transformed from an unknown military driver into a celebrated hero. Military commanders studied her actions as a textbook example of individual initiative and tactical brilliance under pressure. Her story spread throughout the military community and eventually reached the attention of the highest levels of command. But for Maria herself, the recognition and praise felt strange and somewhat uncomfortable. She had never sought fame or glory, only to serve her country and honor her brother's memory. The transformation from driver to combat legend had happened so quickly that she was still processing the events herself. When she finally returned home on leave, Maria visited her brother's grave for the first time since deploying. Standing beside the simple military headstone, she reflected on how much her life had changed since she first decided to enlist. "I kept them all safe, just like you would have," she whispered to her brother's memory. "I hope I made you proud." The small-town girl from Texas, who had only wanted to serve her country, had become something she never expected, a symbol of courage, skill, and determination that would inspire military personnel for generations to come. But in her heart, Maria Santos remained exactly what she had always been, a soldier committed to bringing everyone home safely. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had been only the military SUV driver until the day she took out 32 enemy combatants single-handedly and proved that heroes can emerge from the most unexpected places. Her story became a reminder that extraordinary circumstances often reveal extraordinary people, and that sometimes the most important job in the military is simply getting everyone home alive.